Sophie, can you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about how you got into what you're doing?
Yeah, of course. So I, like, as Lucy mentioned, I'm a cognitive hypnotherapist. I'm also a coach, an NLP practitioner, a PR, and also a mum. So kind of a multi-hyphenate. And actually talking about where I am in terms of what I do is really fitting for this conversation, actually, because 5 years ago, I never thought that I would be any of these things, or, you know, the possibility of creating, you know, a multi-hyphenate career was something that I could do. But actually it was a conscious decision like that I made to actually create, you know, more work-life balance myself and create this portfolio career. And that's what I really want to kind of land today when I'm talking about motivation, is that it's about a conscious decision. You make that decision to make changes to your life. And I made that decision about 5 years ago when I was practicing hypnobirthing when I was pregnant with my daughter. And hypnotherapy was not something that I'd ever come across, like never heard of it, was pretty skeptical about its benefits. The only hypnotist I knew was Paul McKenna. So it was not something that was on my radar. But after having a really positive birth, I returned to work, and as any kind of working parent knows, it's just such a hard juggling act, you know, being a mum and also kind of being on for work. But one thing that really kind of got me through everything was all the tools and techniques I'd learned through hypnobirthing. So kind of the visualization, the breathing. Also, I think most importantly for me, it was the greater self-awareness. And it gave me that self-awareness to really reflect on my life. I'd been talking for years about doing, you know, something different. But like many people, I was in my, you know, 30s and kind of thought it was too late for me. I kind of, you know, started on that path. I've been working in PR for 10 years and I never thought actually it was possible to deviate from that path. But what I realize now, in the job that I do as a cognitive hypnotherapist, it was just a story I told myself. And society had told me that actually, you know, you make a decision when you choose your A-levels, when you apply for a job. That's kind of the career that you do and you're set for life. But actually the reality is that you have so much control, and a lot of the work I do is really about empowering people to take control and make changes to their life, positive changes.
And I'm so excited for this conversation because although it wouldn't seem like it from the beginning of the podcast, the webinar, see, I'm getting everything mixed up. We had a run through yesterday, and Sophie shared some real gems of wisdom with us then, and I know that you're going to talk about those today. So just a tiny bit of housekeeping. We've got the chat box, and my colleague Becky is really kindly looking after that, so she will answer any questions, post any links to things we talk about, and highlight questions to us. So we will take those questions as we go along. I have a poll that I'll be launching. It would be great if you could be involved in that and give us your answers. And as I said, this will be a podcast file, so if you'd like to ask a question and for it to be anonymous, please do say so, and we'll make sure that that is anonymized. So thank you for everyone that's saying hello. We've got lots of people here. I think I recognize some names from previous webinars, so thank you for joining us again. And Sophie, we're going to start off by talking about motivation, which is really key. I mean, I don't know how you feel today, but I'm just looking out the window. It's grey, it's miserable. And, you know, there's a lot going on in the world. So tell us about motivation and what it particularly means to you.
Yeah, I think, yeah, motivation is really interesting, actually, if I kind of apply it to my story. So when I, you know, I've worked in PR for 10 years before I became a hypnotherapist. But I always knew that I wanted to do something different. I wanted variety. But I was waiting for that spark, that motivation, that something just to get me going. And it's crazy. Like I realize now I waited so long for this feeling, something just to set me alight and kind of ignite some sort of action. But I now realize actually I was looking at motivation all wrong. And really, you need to think of motivation as a verb. It's not a noun, it's a doing word. It's about taking action. And if you think of it that way, it kind of completely changes how you approach things, especially when it comes to kind of setting goals or kind of making plans for the future. So my kind of key learning really is that if you want to feel motivated, you'll be waiting forever. So if you've been thinking about signing up to Red January, and you haven't yet, you're never going to do it unless you actually take action. So first thing when it comes to motivation is taking action. That's what drives motivation.
That's a really important point to make. And I was just thinking back to a morning not so long ago when I woke up and thought, I haven't got the motivation to go for a run today. And what was interesting about that is I think I was expecting this magic feeling to be kind of bestowed upon me, to feel like I wanted to get up and do something. But actually, that's not going to come from anywhere else, like you said, apart from yourself. And obviously, everyone that's here today is probably part of the Red community, and they've already been motivated to join up today, to turn up today, to join up to Red. How can they keep that motivation throughout the rest of the month and beyond? What would be your kind of thoughts about keeping motivation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think it really helps for me particularly is to think of, if you looked at motivation on a graph, it would look like an inverted bell curve. So when you start or you set yourself a goal, you have that initial burst of energy. You're really excited and it peaks. Like you're telling everyone, you're really geared up and you're really excited. And it's quite normal for things to dip. And it normally happens at that halfway point. So if you signed up to Red January at the first of the month, you're probably waning now. And that's completely normal. And what you need to do is actually think about the fact that, you know, the end is in sight, and that's what gives you that dopamine kind of rush to get you through the rest of the month. And which is why it's really important when it comes to motivating yourself to kind of meet goals, is to set smaller goals so that you can hack the brain and get that dopamine kind of neurons firing to kind of propel you through your goals.
I love that, the idea of smaller goals, because it can feel huge, can't it, sometimes when, I mean, January can feel like a long month, but actually breaking it down to week by week, you know, what are you going to do in the next week before you come to the next webinar? What are you going to do in the next day? What are you going to do in the next couple of days? Perhaps that's an easier way to approach it than looking at how do I get through not Red January. And also we're encouraging people to carry on beyond January, but a particular something that you're trying to create as a habit or a lifestyle change.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for me, it's the smaller the better. I mean, sometimes goals fall to the wayside because they're just too big, and actually you need to break them down. So for example, if your goal is to be able to run, 5K by the summer, you don't start off running 5K every day. That's just unrealistic. What you do is you work backwards. So think about, how do you get to running 5K? And you work backwards and set those goals and think about, okay, so to get to 5K by July, maybe I need to start with a couple of K, and just work yourself up. And the key thing to remember is, something, basically anything more than nothing leads to something. It's the cumulative effect of what you're doing. So no action is too small because it's bringing you closer to that end goal.
So there's some things that I heard in everything you were saying there, which I think is really important to reiterate. It's the cumulative effect. So it's keeping on going. No goal is too small. Every step is a step towards the right direction. And just going back to what you said before about the inverted bell curve, I think you said. So at the moment, we're at that kind of middle area. And there's a couple of comments here. They call it the messy middle, apparently, which is an interesting one. I like the idea of the messy middle. Someone else really likes the idea that motivation is a doing word. And we've got, this is what my gym teaches us. I dragged myself out of bed to do a Zoom PT, and I had a great session once I got going. So perhaps it is very much about that kind of the momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's lots of research to actually show that movement is really can really help release dopamine, which is kind of basically the reward chemical. It makes you feel good. So if you're setting small goals, it means you're getting those spikes of dopamine, and basically you just let your body do the rest. So if you feel like, actually today it's wet and it's raining and I really don't want to put on my running shoes to go out, that's completely fine. But maybe you think about what you can do instead. So if you don't want to go outside, maybe you could do an online class instead. It's about kind of not writing things off because you can't be bothered, but thinking about, okay, in this moment right now, what would work to get me moving.
And is that slightly about reframing and looking at your thoughts, I guess, kind of not letting an automatic thought lie? Because let's go back to my example of, I'm warm in bed, I wake up, I think, I'm not feeling motivated today. I can either choose to accept that as a thought and a fact, or I can perhaps challenge it and try and work around it.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes with greater self-awareness, because quite often our emotions are automatic. Like because we're constantly working at 100 miles per hour, we don't really have time to stop and pause and think, okay, why don't I want to get out of bed today? Why don't I want to put on my running shoes and go outside? And just slightly unpicking and trying to identify those factors which are driving the way you feel will empower you, because it means, actually, okay, if one of the factors is you've got no one, your friend's not running with you today, perhaps you think, okay, maybe can I find someone else? So you change one variable, will inevitably change your perspective on that, whatever task you have to do. So it's really thinking about, okay, why do I feel like this, and what can I change?
I like that idea of changing one variable. So it's just that one tweak of your situation. So, I didn't feel the motivation to go for a run. Could I go and do something downstairs? Could I do a fit workout, or could I ask my husband to come out for a really long walk with me? Can I change one variable? And I think, that's another great thing to think about, the small steps and changing one variable.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the variable could be something as simple as the time of day. In practice, when we're talking about kind of, I know Adrienne was on the podcast last week talking about the power hour, but maybe you're not a morning person and it's unrealistic to think that you will get up at 6 a.m. and go for a run before you start your day. And actually, what if you switch things up and tried running at lunchtime? For example, maybe that would make you more inclined, because it's actually working with your preference in terms of the time of day.
I love that. And that's something Neil Bailey spoke about on our very first webinar. And we actually did a poll, and most people seem to be more engaged mid-morning or the evening, rather than, there was quite a few in early morning, but it's kind of different people will have different perspectives on this. And as you say, if you're better off in the middle of the day and it's something you can look forward to and you can move your body, whatever it is you're hoping to do, then why not do that? You don't have to stick to any kind of rigid schedule.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why it's so important that when you're setting goals, they're personal goals. It's not because your mum's told you should get fit because you can fit into your, bikini in the summer. It's because you want that goal. It's intrinsically motivated because it's personal to you. So I think that's the number one rule when it comes to setting any goal, is make it personal. Think about why you want to do it. And it gives you a purpose. It gives you, I guess, a guiding star, something to work towards. That's motivated by what you want and what you need, rather than someone else's needs.
And I really took that away from our chat yesterday when you were talking about dopamine, because you were saying you won't get that kind of dopamine hit if it's somebody else's obligation rather than something you want to do.
Yeah, it's absolutely true, because it's not rewarding to you. Some people, I know, for example, some people love cleaning, and that's fine if you're Mrs. Hinch, that you'll love cleaning and you get that reward by having, a really clean and tidy house. But if that's, having a clean and tidy house is not important to you and it's low in your priority list, you're not going to get that same dopamine hit, because it's not a reward, it's a chore. And that's where people fail, because actually they see their goals as a chore, but actually they shouldn't be. It's about, it should be something which is rewarding to you, because it's going to bring some positive benefit to your life.
So Sophie, one of the big things here is treating yourself as an individual rather than using those words that are terrible for yourself, which is I should, which is usually from outside sources, not kind of inner desire, if you like. So I think Mrs. Hinch is an example. You know, some people absolutely love Tap to Tidy. I love watching it, but for me, cleaning is a chore. You know, it's something that has to be done rather than something I feel is really going to make me feel better, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I think when you're setting goals, like something I quite often do is I think, okay, I say to myself, I want this. And then, you know, you finish it with because, like, I want this because I want to feel healthy. I want to be able to run without, you know, without feeling out of breath. So really think about the benefits, because goals are great, but they work better when there's a clear, tangible benefit that you can see.
I want this because. That's great. Definitely. And we will put that in the email and the notes that will go out afterwards so people can remember to implement these different things. Just going to read out a couple of messages we've had. I do NHS Teams exercise Monday to Friday. It makes me commit to a little each day and always makes me feel better. Also a break from work, lol. Well, yeah, absolutely. If it serves two purposes, then why not? I've got another one here. I'm struggling to help motivate my 16-year-old son. He hardly comes out of his room and he has no hesitation in saying no, more like a grunt, when I suggest any form of exercise, even a walk. Oh, that's a tough one, isn't it? But I can imagine that's partly age, it's partly situational, you know, with the lockdown. Is there anything you would suggest, Sophie, for that?
Yeah, it is a tricky one with teenagers. I think it really kind of comes from, you know, to get someone to want to do something, they have to really want it from the inside. And it sometimes helps with presenting options. I think it's really easy to say no when someone says, do you want to come for a walk? No. So what would you like to do? So following up, you know, and following up with, you know, what, you know, would you like to do X, Y, or Z? Because the way the mind is created, it likes choice and it can't not pick. So I think if you can present a choice or some options, or maybe you brainstorm if he's open to it, maybe over dinner, you know, in the evening family meal, you can talk about all the different things that you can potentially do to kind of get him moving or get moving as a family, perhaps. Or maybe you set a family goal potentially.
I like that, and I like the idea of choice, because it's hard not to choose if there's choice. It's easy to say no to one thing, but actually your mind has to think, if you're given 3 options, which of these would be the best out of the 3? There's not an option to say no to that. So yeah, give that a go, see if that works. And I'm just going to check out our poll and see how we're doing. Right, so the question was, how motivated are you? 7% of you said I'm ready to go. 57% of you said I'm motivated some of the time. 35% of people said I struggle to motivate myself, which is understandable. And 2% of people said help me in terms of motivation. So firstly, to the people who say I struggle and help me, you're here today. I mean, that's motivation. You've been motivated to turn up to talk about motivation, which is a tick, and hopefully a little bit of dopamine. But hopefully we'll give you some more tools as we continue to talk about how to harness your motivation. Is there anything you would say about that, Sophie, that kind of area of I struggle to motivate myself?
Yeah, it's really hard, but I think the hardest step you'll take when you're trying to achieve a goal and set yourself is the first one. Just think, as long as you can get out of bed and get your shoes on and get outside, that's the hardest job done. And the you know, once you've done that step, the idea is that you just have to keep repeating that action, so it becomes habitual. In the same way, when we all wake up in the morning, we brush our teeth. It's just the thing that you do. Go into the bathroom, get ready for the day. You want whatever goal you're setting to feel like it's just part of your day. Some people find it helps kind of scheduling things in the same way you would schedule a meeting in the diary. Maybe you need to schedule in whatever action you need to take to meet your goal.
Yeah, I like that. And also use technology. If technology is something that you spend a lot of time around, having something that pops up to let you know Maybe use a title like you time, or something that really makes it clear. Do something for your future self now by scheduling something that pops up and tells you this is your quality time, go and take it now.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I one of the people watching mentioned doing a session with the session NHS at the start of the week, and actually doing things with other people can really help. I think it makes you commit to what you're doing, and also makes you accountable, because I think the key thing is that if you've got people around you who are there cheering you on, lifting you when you're feeling low, when your dopamine kind of plummets, they'll help it peak again. So that's kind of really, really key as well. Like, don't feel like you have to do it alone. I mean, that's why there are personal trainers, that's why there are coaches, because although we can do it alone, it's easier when you do it with others.
Definitely. And that's at the heart of the Red community. It's amazing when I look at the hashtag for Red January 2021 and see so many people every day up and out, whether it's walking in the snow, whether it's walking their dog, whether it's yoga, is great. So do keep on checking in with that Red community, because it's a huge help and a huge resource. There might be someone in your community who's doing Red, and who might want to get through the messy middle with you and meet you for a socially distanced walk or run or whatever you'd like to do. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next section, which is self-confidence. This is a really, really tough one for some people, and I'm going to pop up a poll and ask you to let us know where your self-confidence is at the moment. But Sophie, yesterday when we were talking, you really changed my mind about self-confidence, and you kind of opened my eyes up to the fact that it's not a constant state, confidence. So I would love you to tell everyone on this webinar what you said about confidence and how it ebbs and flows.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think self-confidence is so important when it comes to motivation, because it's yourself telling you what you can and can't do, what you're capable of. So it's really important in that respect. And one thing I always tell people when they say, I just don't feel confident, I'm not a confident person, I say, actually, it's just some situations you're not confident in, because actually it's really rare to find anyone who is in a constant state where they lack confidence all the time. You didn't feel unconfident when you made your coffee in the morning or when you turned on the shower. Yeah, which is crazy. It's just one situation where you lack confidence, and it's just trying to, again, it goes back to self-awareness, trying to unpack what's happening in those situations where you don't feel confident. So, and it's quite often people feel unconfident when it comes to sports or being active, because quite often it's all linked to things or situations which have happened in the past, unfortunately. If you have a situation where, I don't know, at school you were told you're not the sporty one, you're not very sporty, or maybe you were in a situation where people were picking teams and you were last to be picked and people laughed and you were left really red-faced. What happens in that situation is your mind gives meaning to what's happened there, and it pulls out key factors, because the mind is really smart. It'll filter out things and thinks, okay, in the future, if I ever encounter a situation where sports is involved, being active or maybe being in a team, I'm going to keep you out of harm and keep you safe by preventing you from ever doing any things which are vaguely in any way connected to those variables. So what happens is that, again, when you grow up, that person grows up, and someone says, do you want to join our netball team? You'll just immediately say, no, it's not for me. Like, you just won't feel confident, because actually your mind has been clever enough to try and stop you from harm's way by saying to you, you should avoid all sports and anything involved with teams, because you're just not good enough. Yeah. Even though it was just one situation which caused that connection. And that's the really funny way that the mind works.
So if we look at it as a coping mechanism, and we did a podcast with Bryony Gordon a while ago, and she was talking about the fact that her OCD, her obsessive compulsive disorder, for her, the way she looked at it was a coping mechanism that her brain had put into play to try and keep her safe, but it was faulty.
Yeah.
But if we look at the fact that our brain is actually trying to do the best for us, but sometimes is working with old data, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always say to my clients, like, they come in with an issue or a problem, And the way we have to look at it is that issue or problem only manifests is because we are hardwired to protect ourselves from harm and danger. So
Mm-hmm.
your anxiety or that lack of confidence is only there because it's protecting you from further danger or harm. And, you know, in that situation of not being picked for a team is because it is protecting you from embarrassment and you feeling that, you know, feeling that embarrassment and not being good enough.
I mean, the brain is an amazing, amazing thing. You know, it's the amount of functions that it's dealing with at any one time. It's very possible that it will be giving you wrong messages sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Because if you think about it, it's crazy to think, but basically our brains process about 11 billion bits of energy, like information per second,
Wow.
which is crazy. And if you imagine, if we were conscious of all of that information, we'd get nothing done. Like we literally wouldn't be able to get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
But in fact, actually, I think research shows that our conscious brain, our mind, can only actually process 50 bits of information per second.
Right.
So it has to filter. So it doesn't filter in all the detail. It just looks for kind of key information. So I'll look for the context. Like, so the context in that sports example is any sports. And it might look for kind of triggers. So it might be certain people, in which case avoid teams. And that's just the way the mind works, because it can't process all that information to say, actually, that was just an exception to the rule. You know, that's what it doesn't say that, you know, and that's quite often where problems arise, is because our mind has just done a smart thing to create a shortcut. It hasn't looked at the detail because it's got too much information to process, which is where the unconscious comes in. Because a lot of our actions, you know, 90% of our actions are actually governed by our unconscious. Like we're not even aware that one situation in school where we weren't picked for, you know, our netball team has led to us having an aversion for any team sports.
I find this so fascinating, Sophie, the whole thing about the brain and the way the brain works. And yesterday you were saying if the brain can make, I'm paraphrasing now, and you'll be able to say this better than me, but if the brain can make you behave in one way, it's possible that you can tread a different path if you divert or if you work upon those feelings. Please explain that in a way that's much more professional than I did.
So basically, I am very much of the belief that if your mind has created your problem, because it is your mind when it comes to your unconscious, it makes sense that it'll be able to fix its problem itself. So when you work with a hypnotherapist, I'm not doing anything. All I'm doing is guiding you to do what you naturally already do, because we all have the ability to self-hypnotize ourselves. Like we do in everyday life without even thinking. You know, all those times where you've got in your car and driven to the shops and actually kind of forgot about how you actually got there, or when you wake up in the morning, make your bed without thinking, like those are all unconscious behaviors. So simply all your hypnotherapist is doing is guiding you to connect with your unconscious and speak to it and reframe any negative memories that you may have in the past, so that you can basically move on and overcome any issue.
I mean, that's amazing. And when we think about the overworked brain, if you like, what we were talking about before, with all of those bits coming in to our brain, and then hypnotherapy, am I right in thinking it's like a moment where you work with somebody to kind of just slow that down and go into a specific conversation, if you like?
Yeah, it's basically speaking to your unconscious in a nutshell. It's giving you time to pause and just reconnect, because we don't, you know, quite often because of our busy lives, we don't have time to do that. And to dig a bit deeper, you know, it's all in there, kind of the I guess the origins of lots of issues are kind of hidden in our past, and it's just trying to understand, okay, you know, if we have an issue today around kind of, I don't know, presenting or public speaking, where did that come from? Because it just, we're not born, you know, with our issues and problems. They're cultivated, and they're cultivated in the past because a seed's been planted. It may have been planted by yourself because of a situation you have been unlucky, unfortunate to have been put in, or it might be a seed that's been planted by someone else. And actually, a lot of the negative thoughts and feelings we have are actually just stories we've told ourselves. And the key thing really is, if they're stories we've told ourselves, it makes sense that they're stories that we can actually rewrite. And that's the crux of it all. We are the authors of our destiny. You know, most of the things that happen in our life, obviously there are things in our life that we can't control, but most of the time we can. It's about reframing that and thinking, actually, I am empowered enough to make changes to my life. But I sometimes just need a nudge and help to do that. And that's where, you know, a therapist can really help.
Thank you for explaining that, because I think a lot of people, when it comes to hypnotherapy, cognitive hypnotherapy, or even coaching, can be a little bit concerned about what it really is because of terrible stereotypes they've been fed through the media, through comedy, through, you know, just representations of what hypnotherapy is. And I personally have had hypnotherapy some time ago, and I found it deeply relaxing, actually, and was completely aware of what was going on. But also, what was interesting for me was that conversations we'd had, or particular thoughts, continued to come back to my mind.
Yeah.
And that was so interesting because they were so different from what I'd previously been thinking. So, I mean, there's a lot more to go into, and I think we need to do a whole series on hypnotherapy. But what would you say to people who are nervous about what hypnotherapy is?
I would say there's absolutely nothing to be nervous about. It's basically, forget what you've seen on TV in terms of stage hypnosis. It's nothing like that. It's a talking therapy, but with more of a purpose. So the type of cognitive hypnotherapy I practice is actually influenced by a number of different approaches. So it's science-based. So it's influenced by cognitive theory, CBT, also encompasses neuroscience, and uses a range of techniques, including EMDR, EFT, tapping. So it's more of I guess a philosophy rather than an approach, in terms of it's about basically using all the best tools which are out there to help you, the client, to connect with your unconscious, which is a source of all your problems and issues.
And certainly self-confidence would be one of those areas. And it's so fascinating. Becky has just put up some different resources we've got about hypnotherapy and mindset, and we'll make sure we send that in the email afterwards as well. I have seen some of you contributing to this conversation, so I'm going to read out a few of your thoughts. Now, somebody did mention, it's slightly further up, that it's not wise to do things with other people when you're shielding as a vulnerable person, from our previous conversation. Just to say, yes, absolutely recognise that. I think there are still ways you can connect with people online while you're shielding, so you have that feeling of being with someone. But yes, absolutely, please take that as read. If you're shielding, please don't meet with somebody else. But let's just talk about self-confidence. So one comment: I've lost a lot of self-confidence since being made redundant in October. Haven't even tried to get another job. That's tough. And also, how do you deal with constant knocks? It's hard not to feel like a failure or that you're doomed for more. Both of those comments, I mean, it feels like they've had a tough time.
Yeah.
And there is a history of things happening that have really knocked their confidence in terms of being made redundant, or whatever those situations are. Is there anything you'd say about that in terms of regaining that self-confidence?
Yeah, it's a really hard one. I'm really sorry about the redundancies.
Me too.
And I would say that, you know, although it probably feels really awful right now, you must, you know, it's when you're made redundant, it is devastating. Because it's rejection. Basically, you've been told that you haven't been good enough to be selected to stay and keep your job, but actually it's not that things. And that's one thing you have to do. You have to separate the redundancy from who you are as a person. Yeah. It was a business decision. It wasn't about you as an individual. And I think that first step is kind of just really kind of clarifying that in your mind. The next step is really before you can kind of put yourself out there and start looking for a new job, you need to kind of really focus on, shifting your mindset and really creating a more positive mindset around what are the great things about you. And if you're struggling, because you can struggle when you, especially if you're feeling really low about the redundancy, maybe this is something you can do with your friends and family. Could you ask them to tell, or maybe previous people that you've worked with, to tell you what are your strengths? Because quite often when we're in the middle of a crisis, it's really hard to focus on what's good. We just instantly focus on the negative. So maybe that's kind of one thing that you can do. And just, I think, again, we talked about goals earlier as well. Like, you don't, break it down, kind of think about what feels good for you to do right now. What are those steps you're going to take to help build your confidence up? So in order that you feel strong enough and empowered enough to look for a new role, because that's really important. You want to present the best version of yourself when you are ready to start working. And one thing I would say is that I've been made redundant before, and I've never met anyone who hasn't said that redundancy was the best thing to happen to them, because it forces you to pause and take stock of your life. And you've been presented with really amazing, it doesn't feel like that right now, because obviously there's worries, about kind of financial worries about the future and whether you're going to get another job, how you're going to pay your rent or mortgage. But it's given you this opportunity just to pause and reflect on, actually, what I was doing before, was that really making me happy? Okay, what do I want to do moving forwards? Because actually you've got this amazing springboard now. You can do anything. Like, the world's your oyster. You just need to kind of work out what you want to do and build your confidence in order to do that.
I think that's some great advice, and absolutely know that you're not alone in that. You're not alone in feeling that way. And I think sometimes when we're isolating, it's easy not to see other people in the same situation that we are. On both Happiful, Life Coach Directory, we have a lot of different information about redundancy, about working on yourself after redundancy, and resources as well. So please do check those out. And in terms of constant knocks and redundancy, I would also say look at all the things that you've achieved, look at all the things that you've managed and weathered, and you've had the strength to get through those. Your state now might be one of worry and concern, and that's absolutely, that's understandable, but you have done so much already, and you're capable of doing more in the future as well. So I am sorry to hear about that, though. I know it can sound trite when it's coming from someone else who, like me, who doesn't know your full circumstance, but please do check out those other resources and everything that Sophie said. Just one more question, and then we'll move on to talking about the fascinating subject of mindset, because I could talk to you all day about this. Another question: I'm a foreigner in the UK and get really self-conscious about not being a native speaker in working situations. That really affected my self-confidence when I moved to the UK. 10 years later, I still feel this way, although my English improved during all these years. Any tips? Firstly, I'd say amazing to be multilingual, because I only speak English and terrible bits of other languages. So, I mean, that's an achievement in itself. But Sophie, is there anything you would say about that?
I would say quite often when we make judgments about ourselves, they're actually based on our perception of who we are and what we can do. You've mentioned that your English competency has actually improved, which shows that, and the fact that you've managed to join and engage in this webinar is incredible, because I myself wouldn't be able to engage in another language, in that way. So one thing, so key thing for me is just reframing that and just recognizing, actually, this again is just a story you've told yourself. Has anyone actually said to you, you're not very good at speaking English? In which case, if it's a story you've told yourself, you need to kind of rewrite that story that you're telling yourself. Maybe affirmations might help with you. So maybe thinking about writing some affirmations which will build your confidence around kind of speaking English and empower you around. So start those affirmations with kind of I am. So quite fitting for inspired by the podcast. I am good at speaking English. I am capable of, you know, of having a conversation, like fluent conversation with another person in English, and just remind yourself that you've done a lot more than many other people, and that you have fluency to converse in another language. So never discredit yourself for not being fluent, because that's all perception.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And funnily enough, the podcast I Have came about because it was around not being defined by something that has been difficult for you. So I have OCD, but I am a writer, I am a friend, I am a dog enthusiast. You know, it was we are all so much more than the thing that has been difficult for us, or something that we're living with that we wish wasn't that way. So I think, you know, I am, and starting with all the things that you are in the world, you know, you have been made redundant, but you are all of these things, because I guess with that negativity bias, sometimes it's easier to focus on the thing that is the hardest and the most difficult at that moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think quite often when we are faced with negativity, our mind just starts to filter out all the good. So anything that you can do to start kind of creating happy filters. So if it's not the affirmations, it's maybe a gratitude list, you know, sharing about kind of the amazing things that you are grateful for, could really help shift your mindset in terms of that perception of how good you are at speaking English.
And you just mentioned that wonderful word mindset, and we're just going to go on to that, but I am going to check the poll. This is the last poll. So self-confidence, 3% of you said that your self-confidence was great, 22% said it's good, 33% said it's okay, 31% said I struggle, and 10% said I need help with my self-confidence. Again, thank you for sharing that with us. I know that Becky has put up some resources. When you get the email, we'll make sure that you get all of those resources too. Do pop onto Happiful. Our new, this sounds like I'm selling, I'm not. But our new magazine is out tomorrow, and there's lots of different things in there about positivity and confidence. And if you actually subscribe to become an email subscriber, you'll get sent the magazine in its digital format for free on Thursday. So no hard sell here, just please do go and use those resources, because we've developed them for you, just like today's podcast. So webinar, sorry. Mindset. Sophie, let's talk mindset. Yes. How does confidence interplay with mindset?
Yeah, confidence is a really important part of mindset, because again, it's about, you know, your mind telling you what you can or you can't do. And there's been quite a lot of chatter, I guess, over the about kind of a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And the key thing is that you want to go through life with having a growth mindset. You don't want a fixed mindset, because a fixed mindset is basically you creating this fence around you, telling you what you can and basically you can't do anything outside of this fence. This is where confidence or lack of confidence comes to play, because if you don't believe you can climb over that fence, you're not going to be able to shift, you're not going to be able to kind of move forwards or fulfill any dreams or ambition. So mindset really is everything when it comes to life, because it's all about growth and moving forwards and actually fulfilling your full potential and what you can achieve in life.
I think that's really interesting, fixed versus growth mindset. And if you're somebody who perhaps is struggling with a fixed mindset, how do you start to move towards that? How do you start to move towards changing your mindset? Because are we always aware of what our mindset is?
Yeah, because I think with a fixed mindset, so I would say that a few years ago, I had a fixed mindset, because I'd reached 30, been working in PR and, you know, for a while, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to retrain. There's no way I'm going to change jobs or to take a different path. And that wasn't really true. I mean, you hear it all the time when people are like, I'm too old to do this, I'm too old to that, but it's never, there are a few things where it's really too old to start something new. It never really is. And it's because I was just playing, when you have a fixed mindset, you place obstacles, the fence, there's a fence around you and everything is an obstacle you constantly climb. And it feels relentless because you're like, there's just too many things that I need to overcome to get to where I want to be. When you have a growth mindset, you see those obstacles as opportunities. So I think if you've got a fixed mindset, what you need to do is be pragmatic in terms of your approach, and you need to work out a plan. And you mitigate anything that you think could come in your way, like the worst case scenario. So what is the worst case scenario for you starting a new job, like a new career? What's the worst case scenario might be you have to start at the bottom. Okay, so how are you gonna overcome that? Like what's the, think about the worst thing and work out a plan that could help mitigate that worst thing. So, there are no obstacles. They're just things that challenges there for us to kind of work out a plan to overcome.
So that is so interesting, that idea that a pragmatic approach if you're someone with a fixed mindset, because perhaps having a growth mindset feels a bit too much like there's too many variables that you couldn't control. What's really interesting about what you said is that at the beginning you said that you were quite skeptical about hypnotherapy before you worked with hypnobirthing and became a coach yourself. Adrienne Herbert, who's on this week's podcast, said that 10 years ago, if you'd have said, practice affirmations to her, she would have been completely cynical about that.
Yeah.
We all start somewhere. So if you're listening to this and thinking, that's all right, but it's just not for me, just start. It may feel a little bit uncomfortable at the moment to start to try out thinking in a different way, but also maybe surround yourself with some of that. Read Happiful magazine, listen to some podcasts that aren't ours that talk about this kind of thing, and just test it out, test the water. You don't have to stick with it if it's something that jars with you so deeply. But just by listening and reading and participating more, actually something might stick. What would you say about that? Is that good advice, or is that just me being...
That's absolutely good advice. And something I quite often do with clients who have a fixed mindset is it's called the rocking chair exercise. So you imagine yourself in the future in your rocking chair, 90 years old. What do you want to be thinking when you're reflecting your life? And you don't want to be reflecting on the fact that you had this chance, but you weren't brave enough to give things a go. Like, that is the worst. Like, for me, that is the worst thing that could happen. I'd come to my end of my life and I wasn't brave enough just to take a risk, because what's the worst thing that could happen? You start again. And there's no joy in just continuing to do the same thing, or continue the same path, if it's not making you happy and it's not making you feel fulfilled.
I think that's brilliant. I want to acknowledge that there will be some people at the moment who are feeling at the bottom of their capacity to look for positive and kind of movement forward. And I get that, having been there, that sometimes when you hear people talking about things you can do, it's quite hard to even get out of bed. So perhaps you're not there at the moment, but small steps, like Sophie said earlier on, the fact that you're here today means that you've done one positive thing in today to talk and to think about motivation. Is there anything you'd add to that, Sophie?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you are feeling really low and you just can't be motivated to do anything, I think it does help to be more future focused. So maybe if you're not journaling, maybe start journaling, or making kind of thinking about, what do you want from this year? Like, you don't have to go, okay, you don't have to do the rocking chair exercise, but actually think about what can you do in the next month or tomorrow that will bring you a bit of relief and is a step towards you kind of changing your life. Because again, it's the small things, and it's the small things which will give you that dopamine hit. And that's the key thing for me, is that just try the small things and you get that hit, and your body will do the rest. Your mind will do the rest. The more your mind feels like it's doing, it will feed that motivation, and gradually over time you will feel more motivated. And for me, it's not about comparing yourself to others, because you are different, you're an individual. So, and it's your life, no one else's. So don't think you have to have, worked out your life plan by the end of this week. Next week, next month, that's fine too. It's about the cumulative small actions that you can make that's going to make a positive change. And I think when you're low, it's about the small things that you can do. And when you're, feel empowered and feel more like yourself, you can look at stretching out those goals a bit further.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful advice. And I absolutely love talking to you about this because I find it so fascinating in terms of mindset, and actually learning is a really good thing if you're feeling quite low, so just learn something new every day, reading something different. It's one of those things that helps along with connectivity. Perhaps if you can get outside, it's just one of those things that helps to lift you, I think, is hearing and understanding new things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so key about learning, because I think society programs us to think that we get to a stage in life where it's not possible to learn anymore. Actually, there's no point learning a new language because you've plateaued, like the mind can't take anymore. But that's rubbish. It's just a story again that we've told ourselves. And actually, it's quite interesting actually, being a parent to my daughter when she, and trying to foster a growth mindset in her. So quite often when she kind of encounters something she can't do, she'll say, "Mama, I can't do this." And I always say to her, it's not that you can't do it, you just don't know how to do it yet, and you need to learn how to. And
I love that.
and that's very much a message that we should be telling ourselves. Okay, I can't speak French, but I can learn how to. Like, I don't know how to use PowerPoint. It's not that you don't know how to, you just don't know yet. So just changing and reframing language can make all the difference. And I think, if you're telling yourself, every time you face a situation where you say, "I can't," just change that to "I can't yet." Like, will make all the difference. Just say it out loud, say it in your mind, whatever, but just start changing the language you use to speak to yourself so it's more positive.
Sophie, that's brilliant. That's really brilliant. And I'm going to go back. We're nearly, let's see what the time is. We've got about 7 minutes left. It's gone so quickly.
No.
It's gone so quickly. So I'm just going to read out a couple of comments. Francesca has said, "This is brilliant. I just don't know how to do it yet." Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to be using that as well. Some really lovely feedback. This is insightful. Thank you, Sophie. Sharon has said, "Accepting your limitations and abilities doesn't stop you from setting goals or challenging yourself. You're just happier with yourself while you're doing them." That's great. And the lady who sent in a question about speaking English, she said, "Thank you so much for your kindness in answering my question. It made me emotional. It's so helpful, especially that I am currently looking for a new job too. I'll work on that. We'll all be thinking of you and with you on that." I'm just going to have a look at the other questions that we've got before we finish. One other thing, someone said, "This is so relevant to so many of our colleagues right now. I wish they could all hear this, Sophie." They can. On Friday, it will be up on the I Have podcast. And also you will get emailed the podcast and the webinar replay. So forward it on to people, and get people to check out our YouTube channel as well, because they can see all of this for free. So a couple of questions to finish off with. What about when a lack of confidence is an issue for a lack of motivation?
Yeah, tricky one. So I think you have to kind of deal with them as separate things. So quite often people make the mistake of trying to bucket things together. Actually, you need to deal with the lack of confidence first, and really kind of look inwards and try and understand, where does that lack of confidence come from? Or you can flip it around and focus on where, when do you feel most confident? And see if you can bring in those factors or variables. Do you feel more confident around friends? In which case, is there an argument for you for doing more things with other people, because that actually other people can help boost your confidence. So really kind of understanding, okay, what's driving your lack of confidence will actually empower you to do more. And that's a key thing about motivation. It's about action feeds motivation. The more you do, the more motivated you will be to propel yourself forwards.
So confidence is almost a foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to kind of deal with one thing at a time. And once you've kind of dealt with that, then you can work on your motivation.
Wonderful. We've got one more question, which is, "My husband feels demotivated, especially in COVID and in winter." I mean, I get it. It's tough at the moment with the uncertainty and also the seasonal weather. I mean, I would love some sunshine right now, but this person has asked, anything he can take as a supplement or he can do to how he improve. Sorry, I really can't speak today. or what he can do to improve how he feels?
I think if looking at kind of neuroscience, there's lots of research around how exercise and movement can actually hack your dopamine and get your neurons firing. So a key thing is, even though he doesn't want to, he needs to kind of get out and moving, get his heartbeat racing. And gradually that will kind of bring back some vigor to life. Definitely look at your diet, because of your diet kind of is really important when it comes to energy levels. But I would say it's really hard when you're feeling down, and you need to kind of think about, okay, what is the best approach for me to kind of getting out of bed and kind of moving forwards, and breaking it down. Maybe he needs to set a plan. Okay, so by the end of the week, I'm gonna do something. So whatever it is, I'm gonna log on to LinkedIn and look at, I don't know, look if he's looking for a job, update my profile, for example, and break it down into tiny steps, because it doesn't have to be large steps. It's the small things that you can do. And he's really lucky to have your support as well, because that will make all the difference. Your support and encouragement, being there as a cheerleader, will give him the confidence to just to take some action.
Never underestimate the power of being a cheerleader for someone else. It also does wonders for you to be supporting someone else. That's another thing that can really help with mindset, is positively impacting the people you love, I think. And I would go back to what you said earlier on when we were talking about one participant, 16-year-old, who didn't want to do things. Maybe the choice, maybe giving choice, rather than, you know, what shall we do? Or maybe saying, today I'd like to do X, Y, and Z. Which one shall we do first? Or which one do you fancy doing with me? Could be a good way of doing that. We've come to the end of our time, which is sad, because there's so much more we could talk about. I was terribly inarticulate at the beginning of this, because I've been recording a podcast, which you probably can tell because I keep on saying podcast. So Sophie, can you tell us again where people can find you, and where they can follow you as well?
Yes, of course. So you can, of course, find me on the Hypnotherapy Directory, and at my website, which is the-inner.com. And I'm also on Instagram at The Inner Practice, where I post kind of affirmations and tips as well. Being quite slack on that at the moment, so it'll motivate me if some of you follow and join me on Instagram to post more.
Wonderful. And again, we're Happiful, happiful.com. The new magazine is out on Thursday. If you head over to happiful.com and subscribe to our mailing list, you will get that sent free to you as a digital copy, I believe, on Thursday. Also check out the Happiful app, which is free to download and use. We'd love to stay in touch with you. Please let us know what you thought of this today. Do share on social media. I apologise for my terrible stutters and inarticulation throughout this, but I will strive to do better next time. Sophie, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed chatting to you, really and I'd love to do another one of these again soon, purely on mindset. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Have a lovely day. Thank you. See everyone soon. Bye-bye.